Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming at you with another video. All right, so doing a therapy session this morning. Can't quite leave the hotel because there's nothing quite available at the other place right now. She said she has 7 people who need to pay. A good portion of the time, there are a few who have to check out because they can't pay. So it's like a good chance somebody will come open, but ultimately there may not be a room for me today at the New Studio Lodge Hotel, which means I probably have to stay here and for the night and then see tomorrow who would be checking in. So it's going to get a little tricky. I don't know what the availability is. I've never had that happen. So, and I have to check out of here at 11. She's talking about she's going to call me at 12, so it can get real tricky for me today. But going over there, sitting down and waiting for somebody to check out, there are no checkouts today, which is not surprising because 3 weeks ago there was only like one room available and I was able to get it. So like they've been booked up for the summer. So that's kind of what's going on. But I'm optimistic something will open up, but I don't know if it'll be air conditioned. So that could be another thing to think about. But yeah, I'll leave it in the Most High's hands. I'm not worried too much about it. You know, I just have to call my uncle and tell him to wire me some more money to make it happen if it comes to that. So we will see. But the good thing is, if it's a non-air conditioned room, it costs less. So, and I think there's a chance I can do like a partial contract, maybe a 1-day contract, and then transfer myself into an air conditioned room. So that's just what it'll have to be if that's what the case is. But you know, like I said, I leave that in the Most High's hands. I'm not worried about it, man. I'm in good spirits. You know, that the situation is as it is. That's the process of what it is I go through with this. Sometimes it'll work out, every once in a while it may not. I haven't had it not work out as of yet. And I'm very thankful that through the major heat wave I was able to get air conditioning, because there was a chance I wouldn't have had it. So if I don't have air conditioning this week, I'm still thankful for what I've already had. And most importantly, you know, I'll be thankful to get anything at this point. So that's really what it is, man. Just continuing to live this circumstance. I ain't worried about it. I gave it some prayer this morning. I didn't wake up in bad spirits. So it's 9 a.m. I got that information early, 9:30, something like that. And you know, we move forward. Yesterday was good. I checked into this place, did everything I needed to do early, and they checked me in right away. So yesterday went great. This morning, woke up, drafted some basketball teams since that was something that was available for me to do. Y'all know I love to do that. So I did 2 this morning, and listened to some content about you know, the peace that's going on, the peace treaties that are taking place within communities in this city. And you know, we've talked about that in one of my previous therapy sessions. To the best of my ability, I tried to stay as vague and as distant from talking about specific people's communities and stuff like that, since we know how sensitive that can be. But in listening to some of these individuals that are talking, I just see that there's a lot of not gonna say infighting, but online disagreements about whether or not it can be possible, and people are bringing up points of interest that could, you know, bring some clarity to my mind in regards to what else to be considered. You know, some people have talked about previous peace treaties where circumstances fell through, and then now rival individuals have each other's communication and phone numbers. You know, maybe some things were said to one another that could have been used against one another, things like that. You know, people more or less end up doxxed in situations where they think peace is going to be cool, be possible, and then, you know, so they exchange numbers, go to people's houses, eat or whatever, and the situation falls through. Now you know where such and such lives. Now it can turn into a situation it's unsafe. So it's a lot of different things that have to be taken into account. We mentioned on this camera, anytime there's something like this going on, there's always going to be some individuals who are going to be naysayers. The possibility of individuals being in between circumstances meant to keep people separate. We talk about how you know, in the past it's been understood that sometimes the cops were in between situations. Snitches were placed in position to keep people separate, to keep people at odds. You know, one guy brought up a very important point about prevention programs being funded by the government, but if there's no violence, then those programs don't necessarily need funding. So in situations that this person referred to, he was aware of guys being encouraged to engage in violence to keep programs going that ultimately kick money back to the community. So like I said, that devil in the middle who wants to keep people separate is going to always be in place to stir up confusion and ultimately keep people at odds. And I think it's something that needs to be taken into account, regardless if you want peace in these communities or not. I think some of these concerns that are being brought up need to be taken seriously and not brushed aside as just naysayers who don't want peace. Because there are some things that can go wrong in the presence of trying to do right, and they need to be taken account for, just like what can go wrong if people fail to find peace. I think being intelligent is the best way for us to survive all of the things that are coming at us as a black community. And being steadfast on peace is definitely the most important thing in regards to these communities that are killing each other off left and right. I think that, at the end of the day, being a positive voice toward the encouragement of not only that peace should be strived for, but that it can be obtained, is something that needs to be more. Need to hear more of that. We're seeing individuals who are coming saying it's not possible, saying that some may not be okay with it, so maybe it's not going to happen. I think that that's obvious when you're looking at something that has yet to be accomplished, that doesn't necessarily have the odds stacked positively with itself. But at the end of the day, I think when it comes to circumstances like this, the notion of being a contributing voice to the optimism of this particular subject can bring about a culture change in regards to what's going to be accepted and what it is that is expected to be possible. And so when I hear individuals angry or offended at the notion that pessimism is in place, even if those pessimistic conversations bring about some very good points, I think that ultimately what I'm seeing consistently is people being offended by that who are pushing for peace. And so that's really what I think is unfortunate, because for myself as an outsider, I want to see peace, but I also want to know of the different factors that can go wrong when advocating for individuals to be blatantly open with sudden change of any kind. Because if certain things fall apart, they can be even more difficult to bring together once people have their mindset on peace being possible and it not working out for whatever reason. Then it can be even more difficult to try to put those pieces together later on. And that was something that one of the naysayers, so to speak, or one of the individuals who were bringing about pessimistic points of view, was saying that in his community he had seen peace be a strive for, and then circumstances went left. So now he don't necessarily believe in it, and it'd be great to see, but he ain't believing in it. And I just think that those deterrents, when you look at it from a spiritual perspective, as well as from a viewpoint that's looking for those who are trying to disrupt, who may not be insiders, who may not have the best interest in mind of the black and brown community, I think that's what really becomes a situation where you see that intention being put in place deliberately to deter people who would otherwise be optimistic from ever considering being peaceful with one another. It is big business that people continue to be in conflict. There are a lot of people who benefit greatly from warfare of many kinds, and they are not going to want war to go away, because that stops their money flow and whatever their intentions to power ultimately are. So when considering all of these things, I just try to be a voice from the outside as a black man, 40 years of age. I don't have any children, but I'm glad that I don't, because there's a good chance that growing up in this city, they would have been faced with um, these type of circumstances and these type of cultures. And sometimes a parent can deter those cultures. Sometimes a parent can't do anything about it. And so, while I want to be a father, growing up in Los Angeles, I can see where that would have been a headache and a half for me, trying to raise children. I understand my father raised children in Pasadena, Altadena area, and some of them streets in the 80s when my siblings were growing up, in the 70s when my siblings were growing up, they were in the thick of the madness. And you know, I don't know the details of their lives necessarily, because I wasn't there and I'm not incredibly close to them, but I know there were some things that my father's household had to face that were directly attached to the culture that we're referring to here. Family members being a part of these communities, as a lot of black people from the West Coast understand, that's just part of it. And no matter how distant you are from it as a black person, you're going to have some people you're related to that are likely going to be either in those communities, affiliated with those communities, or be associated with people who are. And so that's really what it comes down to. That's why for me, even though I'm not affiliated with anybody, I have friends that are family members that may be, or that definitely are, to be honest with you. And it becomes a situation where I want to see peace in these communities based on that and other things that really matter to me. You know, just the preservation of human life. And you look at what's going on in our country and see what our government is co-signing in regards to genocide, and how easy it is to brush aside Palestinian lives. I just think about how that was pointed at us for many years. All of the things that are being pointed at the Palestinian people today, in silencing their voices, they suffer, you know, being dystopian about their suffering and pretending it's not happening, brushing them aside even when they're crying out. You know, a Palestinian lady of American, actually she was Turkish from what I understand, Turkish American, born in Seattle if I'm not mistaken, lost her life, was murdered in Gaza by, not Gaza, somewhere in Palestine, maybe in the West Bank, I'm not really certain, by settlers who, well, let me get my words straight. She was not murdered by settlers. She was murdered by IDF soldiers who were protecting settlers as they were continuing to do whatever disruption they were doing in the circumstance she was involved in. I guess she was part of an organization that was going to those places to protect Palestinians from settlers as a physical deterrent to keep them from just harassing these people. And IDF soldiers naturally are there to protect the settlers as they continue their rampage against Palestinian civilians. As ridiculous as that sounds, that's exactly what's going on there. And I guess in the presence of all of that, they targeted this lady and shot her in the head. And, you know, she's not the first American to lose their life in Palestine / Israel. And the American government not be as eager to see justice, but more so eager to be diplomatic in regards to their relations with Israel. So just like everything else, they say we want to get the facts first. We're not condemning the murder. We're not demanding anybody's head. We're more so interested in just sending condolences to the family, and then from there moving on. As to which no justice is found because of the upper diplomatic relations between America and Israel that ultimately take precedent over American lives, and certainly over Palestinian lives. And so for me, it's like, when I see that's what's going on to the Palestinian people, and I reflect on the information and understanding that I have that was similar in how they treated African Americans, or, you know, in its own way, just as awful, I understand why it's so important for us to be intentional on undoing the cultures that allow us to kill one another, because we can't trust our government to have our best interests at heart. We can't trust our government to see us as valuable human beings, and we certainly can't trust that their intentions when providing programs and things of that nature are meant to see us thrive at all. And so when you understand that your life has been brushed aside by your own government, by the people that you pay your taxes toward, and you see them doing it to others as well in some of the same fashions, you understand why you need to go back to your respective corners with your people and organize a way to, at the very least, not continue to see one another as their biggest enemy. And so that's what it really comes down to. You see what's going on there, and it's like, man, I'm not trying to see us continue to slaughter one another in the name of places that we do not own. It doesn't make any sense in any way. We're much stronger when we're not doing that, when we're together on a united front with understanding that our voice matters if we come together, our dollar matters if we come together, our influence matters all over the world in regards to our culture. And the thing that we're lacking the most is something I heard yesterday on some content I was watching, was structure. We have the influence of the world in many ways, but we can't seem to get together well enough within our own respective situations to be able to move as a unit, as a people. And a lot of other peoples don't have that issue. And I don't think that's by accident when you consider the trickle down of psychological effects on a community that come from the civil rights issues that we had after slavery as well. It just becomes a situation where a people may look at certain things differently in regards to whether or not they can trust one another, or the nonsense that has been going on with us in these tribal situations. A lot of us know how to be tribal, but not necessarily how to be structured. Don't look at one another as respectful because we've seen how one another has been treated. And that's really a real psychological thing to really think about and study. When you see grown men demasculated and dehumanized for generations at a time by people who don't look like them, over time, I'd imagine what it can do is make it so that you don't respect one another to the utmost fashion. When we continue to see images of ourselves as slaves and images of ourselves being beaten and all these different things that date back to the 1600s, and you look at your brother, how much respect can you have for him when you've seen him be belittled and ultimately adhere to that for which is not themselves? So I think that's what it comes down to. The idea of structure comes first with an understanding that you're strong and that you can trust who it is that you're following. And I think in a lot of cases our image has been beaten down so much, not only in the eyes of others, but in our own eyes, to where we're docile in the sense that we don't trust one another or believe one another as worthy of being followed as a unit. You may trust this brother or that brother depending on who and what they've proven, and which in a lot of cases is violence, is the accumulation of wealth by any means, and things of that nature that often don't have good energy attached to it. That's what within a lot of these communities is most respected, and you follow those people, but not necessarily looking at each and every brother and saying that's a grown man that may have some wisdom about him, his life matters. When you get beaten over the head over and over again with propaganda that belittles your image, it's easy to disrespect one another. And so that's what it is. I think that's a psychological hangover from the different traumas that we've gone through as a people. And I don't think that many people can relate to that, which is why you don't see so much division within so many other communities. Had they been through what black people had been through in the way that we've been through it, they wouldn't trust one another, respect one another as much either. And as I say, that was done to us. I don't think we did that to one another. I don't think we left our respective African tribes with that intention. But just the same, there must be some understanding that there was a tribe mentality that needs to be understood. And unfortunately, it's only but so much understanding we have about it, about our partake in that, based on a lot of our history being erased from us. We don't know who we were. We just know what we've been shown of one another and how we've been treated by others, and how we've adhered to that treatment over time in a lot of cases. Yeah, you had some Nat Turners and some Malcolm X's and some people, you know, that have come up and tried to buck against that energy, but ultimately we've been under that for a long time. So that's what it really comes down to. Do you trust your people when you see how they've been belittled so much and pushed around so much and bullied more or less so much? And the answer is, we need to learn how to. We need to define ourselves, you know, better than what we've allowed these circumstances to. And I think it starts with a culture change within ourselves to say that, yes, we do find ourselves being naturally tribal, but we also understand that a lot of our conflicts and a lot of our fights are unnecessary. A lot of the things that we do to one another, we don't do to other threats. And that docile energy toward others who may do the same things or worse things to us than our brothers, if we're going to be strong enough for the mind to be respectful toward them or forgiving toward them, should we not be forgiving toward one another? If we have so much respect for the police, for the government, even the situations where people are willing to throw their lives away, they still, for whatever reason, won't turn their attention to threats of that nature with the same energy that they turn toward their brothers. And that is a psychological energy that I think a lot of people in many black communities are starting to wake up to, understanding is no good for them, understanding it doesn't represent how they believe themselves to be, and ultimately want to be able to protect themselves from all threats and forgive one another for the same things they forgive others for. And so when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, you see black skin, you want to be proud of what you see. And I think in a lot of our communities, that pride, like I said, has been misdirected into circumstances of negativity and violence, you know, things that are ultimately not meant to reflect positively upon us. You know, my mind goes into a different space, you know, when interacting with people. I know myself to be someone who tends to be articulate. I speak a lot of words. I'm a natural poet. I learned how to read when I was like 10 months. You know, the words came naturally. The English language came extremely natural to me. I don't have to try to paint a picture with my words at all. And a lot of times, people who have the same gift that I believe I have, especially within the conversation of peace within these communities, people who talk like me tend to rub some people the wrong way. And in listening to a few individuals who I believe articulate themselves very, very strongly, or tend to attempt to, they rub some who may not articulate themselves the wrong way, as if they believe themselves to be better than those individuals, smarter than those individuals. I want people to understand that for myself, I don't equate my ability to communicate words as intelligent. After all, I only know one language. When it comes to the Spanish language, I'm not very articulate at all. When it comes to Japanese, not very articulate. I don't think that's a reflection of a person being intelligent. It's a reflection of them having a strong strength in this particular area, but it doesn't necessarily tell the story of whether or not they're very good at math, strategizing, they're smart in terms of wisdom, street smarts. Can they put things together really fast? Do they move really slowly? Some people who articulate extremely well aren't very strong in those particular areas. And some people who articulate themselves extremely poorly may be geniuses in those areas. And I say this with a lot of love and respect. I think following the game of basketball has taught me that. Some individuals who don't articulate themselves very well understand angles better than I ever could, can move in different ways on a basketball court that show me their intelligence in mathematics, that show me their intelligence in accuracy, that show me their intelligence in psychological strengthening over others, having the mental edge over others, having the focus and the attention span that can last past maybe someone else who may be more articulate or may be more athletic or what have you. You get them on camera and maybe they don't speak very clearly. And in that same sport, I've seen guys who've been very articulate, but don't show the same aptitude on the basketball floor. So that taught me a strong lesson about the environment around me and myself, to say I'm not the greatest chess player just because I can use words in such a way that paints a picture, or because I have some strengths in some key areas. It doesn't make me a genius. I don't think me being a good speaker makes it so that I'm to be expected to be an idiot either. But just the same, I don't think it's a reflection of my overall mental aptitude necessarily that I speak very clearly. So, with that being said, I don't want people to feel like I'm better than them, nor do I want people to be angry at me when I speak the way that I speak, because of the intention that I have to be articulate or use words or paint a picture a certain way that maybe they won't be able to with their ability. I find myself frustrated in seeing people frustrated with people who articulate themselves very well, showing some signs of what I think is an inferiority complex because they articulate themselves, that they think the person who's extremely articulate thinks they better than them. That frustrates me because I feel like I've ran into that a lot of times, or people don't like me because I articulate a certain well, or they perceive that I think I'm smarter than them, or they think I'm trying to up them in regards to me communicating the way that I know how to do so. And I feel like if I want to be on their good side, I gotta find ways to dumb down my strength in communication. Not to say that if I'm speaking in a way that they don't understand, I should try to clarify. I don't believe that's dumbing it down. I believe, if anything, that's an intelligence. Being able to simplify things is a smart thing. But just the same, when you're in the presence of people who are generally insecure about their ability to communicate, and they project onto others who communicate well a certain jealousy that makes them feel like they should otherwise not communicate the way they know how to make them feel better, I get offended by that. Those type of wedges can keep people from coming together in situations that otherwise allow for them to be on the same page in regards to the conversation previously, in our community specifically. It's one more thing we can be angry at each other about, one more thing we could be at odds about, one more thing that we need to learn better about one another. One more thing that we could look at each other and say, see, you don't trust that person. Let's turn on that person. Let's snitch on that person. Let's whatever, however that goes. I think we need to all look at the idea that within our country, since the beginning of the process of bringing slaves over here, we have had a certain intention placed upon us to keep us from being articulate and literate altogether. Many of us have been able to, over the years, rise out of that. Now it's understood that a book should be accessible to most people, but some still are not able to articulate themselves or read very well or what have you. And that culture is generational in a lot of cases. We need to understand that for what it is I just described, and know that it's not something that shows a lack of intellect, but it's just another reflection of how much we have to overcome as a people. That they tried to keep books from us, that they tried to erase our history, that they made it law that we couldn't read at one point, that they said we were 3/5 of a human being at one point. These type of things. Yeah, many of us have been able to rise out of that over the course of generations, but some of us are still stuck under the thumb of that. Some of us aren't able to read and write because of the cultures that were put in place over generations in time that didn't allow for people to normalize the importance of being literate. You know, I'm a firm believer that you pass certain traits down to your family members. I would not be surprised if I have a child if one of them is a very good artist or one of them is a fantastic basketball player, because of so much of what I put into my life intentionally focused on those specific things. I wouldn't be surprised if one of my kids ended up being a musician because of how much I appreciate music and how much I've poured into my musical energy. I think some of those imprints are left on our DNA. Good traits and bad ones. And so when I consider that being something that I believe, I think a lot of times learning is a part of that process. When you consider how quick a person learns, how well a person picks up the language, how poorly maybe somebody, in terms of speed learns, and all these different things. When you see what's been done to you as a people, if you subscribe to the thought that things carry forward, then you can see why some of us are behind the 8 ball in some cases. There's a lot to rise up against. There's a lot to rise above. And if we don't find a way to deter unnecessary conflict, we're going to be further and further behind the 8 ball as generations go forward. In regards to what it is I'm describing. In certain situations, we won't be passing forward the right things. If we continue to pass forward tribalism and violence, our kids are going to be more violent and more separate. If we don't normalize viewing oneself in the mirror and seeing themselves as intelligent, and start to utilize the rights of practice toward education, towards wellness and practice of eating and things of that nature, putting forth good habits, putting down vices that are ultimately poisonous in nature, we're going to pass forward even more of that, and it's going to be a further and further gap between ourselves and others who are not in a culture from which they're passing that down. Talk about the wealth gap and the issues there. A lot of that can be contributed to how far we are away from different things that ultimately bring us together to be contributors to society, including working with one another and building with one another, and good practices in spending habits and things of that nature. Making our money in righteous ways that can't be taken from us, buying things that appreciate in value and can stay in generations over time, and ultimately continuing to put good foods in our bodies so we can last longer and perform better in whatever it is that we do to make money. Getting ourselves out of these cultures that are meant to kill us and imprison us and keep us away from what otherwise puts us in a position to make that money. All of these things come together, and we need to see how they do and start the process of passing down better habits to our kids so it's easier for them to put those things together and rise. And so that's what I think this is really about. We are evolving. Everything evolves over time. If it has intentions of learning, it's going to take imprints from those things and pass them to their children. And so I think the same goes with these communities and the gangs. I do believe that they're evolving. I think they're rising up out of the senseless stupidity of cutting down their own numbers. They're listening to individuals who are having conversations. They're seeing a humanization of themselves in a lot of cases online. A lot of people who were silent in the background, only had each other to interact with, now have an audience who's paying attention to them, rooting for them, and learning to personalize them and become fans of each and every one of them from different rival sets and hoods and things of that nature. They're humanized now, as to where they were being dehumanized before. The war on drugs, war on gangs, war on terror, war on whatever. Now it's like we're not listening and waiting for our government and for those who are not in our community to tell us who one another is. We turn on YouTube, we can see one another. We know that person's cool from over there. We know that person's intelligent from over there. We know that person's positive, pushing a positive message from over there. We know that person's articulate over there. We know how creative that person is. We know how resourceful that person is from over there. And so we've, with each and every example, seen something that is otherwise not only make it so that outsiders look at these individuals as human beings, and dare they say celebrities in some cases, but we've also seen people within those communities look out at one another and see the humanity in each other and the similarities in each other, and the hope that there can be more individuals that rise out of those circumstances to shine and overall bring back a more humane image upon their cultures. And so that's ultimately what it is I see. More people within them communities believing in one another based on the legends that are coming out of these communities, rising to the top of the occasion and ultimately giving people hope within those communities and humanizing them for the outsiders to see. Individuals like Nipsey Hussle and Kendrick Lamar, Snoop Dogg, individuals who've rised out of these circumstances to shine and have fans and have people look at them and say, yo, they're doing it. You can see it today online with some of these people that I pay attention to. These aren't just individuals who are in the streets that are wiped away. These are people we turn on seeing their point of view every day and their hopes for what they're doing and their talent and their ability to entertain or what have you. Different individuals, some that are joking all around all day long, others who are extremely serious. And the different humanity facets of these people's personalities come together to help us understand that they have different things to give to the world and to one another. So that's what I ultimately wanted to say, man. I think that the notion of peace comes from a certain humanity that people are starting to realize are within one another and within their rivals. And the notion that there's an audience watching and rooting for them to do so. Not just rooting against them, wanting them to die. Not just rooting against them, wanting them to stay away from them. But individuals who are influenced by their culture and waiting for them to get it right. Wanting to see them every day. Don't want them to die. You understand what I'm saying? I want to see communities come together, not just because of the notion of peace, conflict, but because I want to see my favorite character from over there collab with my favorite character over there. No different than I would have in any other situation in the past. You know what I mean? If they hate each other, I'm never going to see them come together and see what that look like. And people want to see that as they continue to be fans of the individuals from these communities. So I think that this is important. I heard that Kendrick Lamar is going to be headlining the Super Bowl in New Orleans coming up, I think, next year. That's a big deal. This is a person from one of those communities. You understand what I'm saying? Rising himself to the top of the mountain in America to be understood as a Pulitzer Prize winner. Not so far away from his community that he's not tapped into what's going on, but not so close to his community that he continues to reinforce negative images in any way upon his community, but as a hope to what humanity can really look like when it's presented to the whole world from within those communities. What type of special individuals are in these spaces and what's possible for them if they're able to be at peace. What they can display if they're able to have that humanity placed upon them as opposed to the inhumane nature of what it is that's been described of us about how they move. So that's what it is I want to say. Congratulations to Kendrick, and congratulations to everybody who's trying to promote peace within these communities, within these gangs, within these sets. And do not be deterred by the notion that there are naysayers who don't believe, or people who can't perceive the fullness of what it is that I just described in regards to humanity now being in place. It's many people who still have an old way of thinking, an old way of doing things. Some people don't want to change, because if they change, then that's going to expose them for who they are. That's going to leave them outcasted, because they're only there for the conflict. They're only there for the separation. Can't be deterred by those people. Just got to continue to evolve and understand what the bigger picture is and keep your eye on it. So that's my point of view, man. I wanted to come here and say that, give encouragement to people, express my frustrations in my own little personal life, and the notion that I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I certainly don't want to be spoken to as if I'm wrong for speaking the way I do, or being looked at in a way that otherwise makes people angry at me for not for making them feel as if I'm more intelligent than them or what have you. I don't believe I am, not necessarily, but that don't mean that I'm gonna lose confidence in your presence. I think at the end of the day, having confidence in oneself is not something that you should be getting from others necessarily. Knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, perceiving your humanity, and standing on what you believe in should be something you're able to do before you even go out into the world, before you even walk out of your room in the morning. The confidence I have to say everything that I just said didn't come from the influence of nobody else telling me it's okay to say it, but from being having an understanding of my own leadership qualities, and what could come from that is good things. So that's what I wanted to do, man. Be transparent, provide encouragement, provide transparency, and ultimately humanize my people by way of my example. So that's pretty much what I got, man. I appreciate everybody watching BDL 44. I'm out.